With less than 2 weeks to go until Election Day, Missouri's top prosecutor is defending voter ID laws. Attorney General Catherine Hanaway has taken a vested legal interest in a challenge to Indiana's voter ID law. Although it may appear unrelated to Missouri voters, Hanaway says any federal change to other states' voter ID laws threatens Missouri's own.
In Missouri, we finally have a voter ID law that the Missouri Supreme Court has said is constitutional, and we want to make sure that that continues to spread throughout the country.
So would you say that this law is more about states' authority or fraud prevention in elections?
Both. And I don't know that I'd say one takes precedence over the other.
The NAACP challenged the law, claiming it inhibits too many people from voting because of their disabilities or clerical issues in getting an ID.